welcome to our event on Black Joy and a celebration of Black stories through art. Here we're just going to discuss archiving history and how important it is. So we have our three amazing panellists today. We have Mark Thompson, co-founder of Black and Gay back in the day, and then Karis Beaumont of Bumpkin Files, and then we have Staffy Sonaki, founder of Black in Britain. So, take it away, Mark.
Oh, it's up to me. Okay. I'm up here, apparently. Good afternoon, everybody. I've never been here before. I haven't been to the British Museum since I was in primary school, so it's really nice to be back here, and thank you so much for inviting me. So, a bit of introduction, a little bit about myself. So, I'm Mark Thompson. I like to describe myself as a social justice activist, a disruptor, and a troublemaker. And I have been working around HIV, community development, and social justice for about 33 years, and I run a company called The Love Tank, which is a community interest company that works to address health inequalities in marginalised communities, and we run a number of different projects, particularly for queer communities and black and brown people across the UK and globally. Black and Gay back in the day was basically an organic project of mine. It was an idea I had in the shower about a year ago, just at the beginning of LGBT History Month. And I'll talk a little bit about the page in a second. And it really came about, in my mind, because I'm not sure if any of you had seen a TV show called It's a Sin, which came out on Channel 4 in January of this year, which told the story of the UK HIV epidemic from a very particular lens. And as soon as I watched it, I was like, well, this is an amazing, wonderful story, because I lived through it. I'm a person living with HIV and was diagnosed at the same time in 1986. But I felt that it really, really missed black and brown voices from that narrative. And I created a playlist of music to kind of show the music that my friends and I had listened to in the 80s and 90s. And then the following day, I just had this idea, wouldn't it be great if there was an Instagram page which also looked at our lives? So I created Black and Gay back in the day with Jason Okandaya. And Jason approached me. I posted one picture, which I'm going to show in a moment, but Jason approached me, and Jason is a writer and a journalist, and he just reached out to me, and he's a really good kid, and he was like, "Uncle, can I help you with your Instagram page?" And I kind of like, okay, so this is where intergenerational work really, really happens, because I didn't know how to use digital that well. So Jason and I came on board, and we created this wonderful page. And the aim of the page is to capture and show images and pictures of black queer life from 1970 to 2000. It's about taking our history, taking old photos and putting those into the world. We wanted to capture those pictures pre-digital and of that time because we wanted to create a sort of family album. Because a lot of the stuff that we captured today is on our phones and all that kind of stuff. But we wanted to make something which was richer, the textures would be different, and then we would draw people who very often are missing from the narrative. And it was really important for us to put it out at this time because I felt that when we have Black History Month and when we have LGBT History Month, Black queer history very often falls through the cracks. The other thing that I was really conscious of was that when we look at history across the board, and when we look at history of marginalised communities, be that the LGBT movement, the women's movement, the black civil rights movement, we very often think of big named icons. So your Martin Luther Kings, etc., right? These are the big names. But I wanted to remember what I call the foot soldiers, the people who are just going around their everyday lives and making life happen. Because these are the activists. These are the people that keep our lives moving. I tend to talk about the people that make the cups of tea and move the chairs and tables, that write the banners, that clean up after protest. These are the people who keep them moving. So it's an archive of fun, pleasure, dance, and love. There's only one picture of protest in there, and we were really conscious about that because way too often our lives aren't seen through a lens of love and happiness and laughter and just enjoying ourselves. But it's also really reflective because, as it says here, many of the people that we featured have passed on because of the AIDS epidemic, because of poor mental health, isolation, and all of these things which impact on queer communities and black and brown queer communities disproportionately. And one of the wonderful things about the Instagram page is that people have connected again. One of my favorite stories is a friend of mine seeing her ex-girlfriend, who she'd not seen for nearly 25 years, on the page, which was really lovely. But at the other end of the spectrum, younger people looking at the page and going, oh my gosh, that's me and my girlfriend now, or that's me and my boyfriend, or I didn't realise that these clubs and these spaces existed before. I thought we just started it. So I think just providing that narrative for people on an Instagram page, and Instagram was intentional because we knew lots of younger people accessed it, but it's also drawn older people into it as well. So we want to keep these histories alive, visible and vibrant and available to people. And the page blew up. We went from like 100 followers in a day to nearly 800 at the end of the week. And it's just grown and grown and grown. So I've been asked to select 3 pictures today to demonstrate some of the archive. And I'd encourage you to go on the Instagram page and see the rest of it. So the first picture is here, is 1992. This is me with my then boyfriend, Brad, at our home in the Oval in Brixton. And this is, oh Jesus, 31 years ago nearly, or coming up to 30 years, something like that. And this was the first picture that we put out there. And one of the reasons it's really powerful and I really love it, and I always put it in our presentations, because it's a true demonstration of black queer love. And when we look at the images around black love and black gay love, very often whiteness is present, they're interracial relationships, which isn't demeaning those at all. But we felt it was really, really important to show 2 black men embracing, being intimate, being close, and to say that this has always been here. We have always been here. And so this is one of the reasons why I love that picture. And it's really interesting. I hadn't asked Brad's permission for this picture. Oops. But interestingly enough, he contacted me a couple of weeks after it went up that a friend of his in Virginia in the United States had come across the page and had seen it. So that again demonstrates the global reach of the Instagram page and why it was so important for us to do it. So I'm going to flat through. Right, so this next one here is Ted Brown on a bike delivering gay news papers in the early 70s. Now, the reason I've chosen this one today is because Ted Brown, and we call him Uncle Ted Brown, is now 72. And Ted has a long, rich history of queer and civil rights activism. Ted was born in Jamaica and then moved to the United States with his mum in the mid-50s. And his mum became really good friends with Bayard Rustin. Bayard Rustin was a black queer man who was the brains behind the March on Washington. So that civil rights, black liberation is in Ted's DNA. And Ted has been at the forefront of black, gay and queer liberation and movements in this country since the 70s. Ted sent me a message just 2 days ago asking me if I had information around the conversion therapy ban because he wants to start a protest about it. This man is 72 and he doesn't ever stop. And the reason this picture's here is because what we wanted to show was to celebrate Ted, celebrate his life, and you can read about him in The Guardian and loads of other places, but just to demonstrate that we as black queer people in this country have had a presence here since we arrived. We arrived mass numbers in the 50s, but since we got here, we have been present and we have been at the forefront of that work. And Ted is an absolute legend. Many of you, some of you may have heard of Peter Tatchell, who has been a gay rights campaigner. In my mind, Ted should be as celebrated, if not more, than Peter, because Ted has occupied the intersection of blackness and queerness in all of his work and all of his activism. So we salute Uncle Ted. So this is my final picture that I've got here, and this is Miss Kimberly and Win at a drag competition at the Hippodrome in 1990. Now, the reason we've included this in the archive was it was really important for us to have trans representation in here. The archive is a mixture of all of our LGBTQ+ siblings in our community, but very often in our narrative, we are not recognizing the needs of our trans communities. And as we know now, our trans siblings are under attack left, right, and center from the right-wing media, from the government, left, right, and center. But we've got this picture in here because Win and Miss Kimberly were big hitters in the 80s and the 90s. Miss Kimberly came from the United States to London, and Win is from Guyana, I think. And this picture, they were basically killing it in London. And this was at a drag competition. And Miss Kimberly always liked to tell the story that I actually won that competition. And, you know, but Win and I are still really good friends. But this picture is really important for us in the archive because it demonstrates one presence, but also we know very often the sad and tragic stories which accompany trans lives. And as I've said, the page is about joy, and it's about love, and it's about laughter, and how fabulous do these two look here, absolutely kicking it. And they used to run a club called Kinky Galinky just down the road from here in Leicester Square, which is a big, vibrant space full of queer people of colour. And this is in the 80s and the 90s, a history that is very, very often forgotten, misremembered, and not included. So this is why we've got it here. So those are my three pictures that I've chosen. I'd encourage you to look at the page. Our Black queer history runs through runs through this country like a thread. We don't describe it as just Black queer history, it's Black history, it's British history, and that's why we're here. So thank you very much, and I look forward to taking some of your questions.
Up next, Caris, do you want to go?
Yeah. Afternoon, guys. First time up on the panel, so bear with me. So my name's Caris Beaumont. I am a photographer, creative director and curator from Hemel Hempstead, Hertfordshire. My work, it ranges from portraiture and fashion photography. It primarily explores cultural subjects within Black diasporic experiences whilst highlighting nuances, emotion and community through visual storytelling. I'm also the founder of Bumpkin Files. It's an archive multimedia platform and photographic series which was founded in 2017, and it explores Black life in Britain beyond the London-centric narrative. Whenever we have dialogue and discussions about Black Britain, oftentimes the wider communities are like left out. And it was something like I've noticed when I was younger, you know, being a country babe, basically. So I founded it in 2017, and I came to the realization that it was needed after hearing stories from like my parents. So they're both from different parts of Hertfordshire, and they used to tell stories to me and my brother, and I used to relate to it on like a different level, and not because that they're my parents and they used to tell us stories, but I think the fact that our lives were quite parallel in terms of our upbringing, basically. So it started off as a really small archive project. I put it out on my Instagram, on my website, and a few people popped up like, oh, like, I haven't really thought of it like this, or, oh, like, you know, I can kind of relate. And even I discovered other creative people who actually live near me, but we would just assume, like, you know, we're just from, like, they were from London or whatever. There wasn't really much dialogue in, like, where we were from. So we're also a submissions-based archive. So for the past couple of years, people's been submitting images. So it's reached to places in, like, you know, Wales, Scotland, Bristol, Birmingham, and with the archive page as well. I've just been doing research just to see how accessible it is to find photo reference to the wider Black British scope. So one of our main missions is to bridge the cultural gaps, just provide accessible information, and just bridge gaps between communities as well, so we understand one another a lot more. And I think with me being a photographer, it was also realising just the responsibility that we have, having a camera and being able to, I guess, share our truths and tell the truth with the camera, basically. So I would go and photograph, like, my friends, people in the community, creative people who are just doing really well. So here's my friends Cannon and Taylor. They're both dancers. Yeah, they're doing really, really well. And it's just being a photographer as well, just reaching out to brands and companies and collaborating and filling in that gap when it comes to Black British storytelling as well. Here's one of my favourite pictures. It's my mum outside her grandparents' house in Swindon. And interestingly, their house used to be like the cultural hub, basically. Families used to come up. My mum's friends from like Hertfordshire used to just jump on the coach. When they come to Swindon, they would come to my grandmother's house, and it was my great-grandmother and father's house. So that was just a spot where everyone can come together, cooked, eat food, partied, everything. So I really love this picture. This is another picture like I love. So this is of me, my brother, and my cousins who are also from London, and they used to like come up and visit us a lot as well. And we used to go and visit them too. We went to Cornwall and yeah, just experienced just being on like a really nice British beach. We had a really good time. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Staffy Samaki and I am the founder of Black in Britain. I'm a photographer and a casting assistant too. So Black in Britain is essentially an audio-visual platform that aims to elevate Black history and talent in the UK. How did it start and why? So as you can see, this is my design that I made when I was like 16. And I took inspiration from that to kind of bring Black in Britain back in like late 2019, early 2020, because I essentially wanted to create a space online for me to create a community where I felt I could relate to other people too, because like looking at social media and things like that, representation via like shows and things like that, I didn't see myself and I didn't really feel like I could relate to anyone. And then this is design. I was really gassed. I was like, I made this when I was 16. So like, yeah. And then this is kind of like a photography project that I started because I love shooting on instant film. I used to like 35, but 35 just takes forever to develop. So I moved on to instant. And essentially, this was kind of like the first kind of like photographic project that I started with Black in Britain, which essentially is like the faces of Black people in Britain taken over the course in 2019. And then here's a video. My friend's actually there, Shah, who's actually in the video. But basically, this was like the first link up that I did for Black in Britain, because like before the lockdown happened, Black in Britain essentially was meant to be like a link up every month or every how many times I could do it. To just be around Black people and talk about experiences, relate and network. But obviously because of the pandemic, that stopped. And then there's a quote in Open Water that I like. It says, "Last time we met, you said you're a photographer," she says. No, someone told you I was a photographer and I squirmed at the idea, you say. Why? You did the same when you were dancing, your dancing was brought up. He didn't answer my question. I don't know, you say. But yeah, I take photographs on the other side of the window, Piccadilly bustles, and man swells his bagpipes, the sound drifting up towards you. Friday evening and the city is bordering on frenzy and sure of what to do with itself. But yeah, I just really like that quote because sometimes I don't feel like I'm a photographer, but I just use it as a creative medium to kind of express myself. And I feel like with Black in Britain, essentially that is how I express myself and how I try to, I guess, explore being Black in Britain and just getting everyone's kind of experiences and just learning about other people's like living in the UK. And yeah, this is my website. And as you can see, Black in Day in the Day and Bumpkin Files is on there. So if you want to check it out, I've got their links on there too. So on the resources. But yeah, so essentially Black in Britain website is just a way of me collating everything that I found online, just sharing it with a bigger community. And then yeah, this is where you can find us. I don't actually use TikTok, by the way. Like TikTok is mad confusing. Like, but yeah, you can find us all there. And yeah, that is Black in Britain. Thank you.
Hello. Okay, it's on. Thank you, all of you, for presenting. This is really great. So we're going to have a little discussion now before we open up the floor to question and answer. And my first question to each of you is, how did you come to the names of your pages? What was the inspiration behind the names of your pages? Who wants to go first?
Okay, I'll probably go first.
Yeah.
Is it on? It is on. So I think originally the project, I didn't really intend it to grow and be nurtured in a way. It was originally called Country Bumpkins, because that's usually like a word referred to us, really. But I thought, I want something a little bit more edgy, you know? So I just took the word bumpkin and I was just like, okay, cool, that's one side. And then files, and I was like, okay, what does this thing consist of? It consists of the archive, it consists of the photographic series and projects. So it's just a place, it's just everything, just country, everything, you know, what I'm trying to do. So that's how I come up with Bumpkin Files, and it stuck, and yeah, haven't changed it. Thankfully.
Oh, that's awesome. It is a really nice name.
No, thank you, thank you.
Me? Okay, my mic is working. Back in Britain, I actually used to hate the name
Okay.
because I feel like, because your name was so cool, I was like, this is so basic, you know, it's just Black in Britain. But I feel like it literally just describes being Black in Britain, and from the page, I just try to show what it's like being Black in Britain, essentially just like amplifying talents who don't have the access to, you know, a bigger crowd, or just showing the history that people don't know about. For example, like last year, Steve McQueen came out with a series called Small Axe, and that was like kind of like a whoa. I knew some of the things that happened, but not to a certain extent. So when that series came out, I just kind of researched more and posted a few things about it. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Mark?
I mean, I think both of them are incredibly powerful names, and I think you should be really proud of them. I think Black in Britain is a natural statement, a fact, you know, rather than just a name. I always say there's no such thing as an original idea, which there isn't, you know, that everything's been done before. And I went to an exhibition at the Royal Festival Hall about 3 years ago, and there was a fantastic exhibition. I think there's an Instagram page called Black in the Day, which is almost very similar to what you're doing with with archive pictures, and I've done, which was Black folk sharing non-digital pictures from the 70s, 80s, and I was like, wow, that's amazing. And so when I had this idea to do this page, it literally was like a gift. It was like Black and Gay back in the day, and it rhymes, and it's got a nice flow to it, and it does all of those things. And we often talk about back in the day, right? And so Black and Gay back in the day just flowed off the tongue beautifully. It fits on a nice Instagram, so my creative director in my company was like, well, I can play with that. So yeah, so that was it, quite simple and straightforward.
That's awesome. It's like a little eureka moment.
Yeah, yeah. Take showers.
Yeah. And wash your legs.
Yeah, I knew that.
So, just another question here. So, we're just curious to see, how do you source your material? And it's incredible material. The photos are amazing. Just want to see like where you guys get it from and the origins of that. So,
Yeah.
All of our materials on Black and Gay back in the day are sourced by submissions. I was saying earlier, very often I've called in favours to aunties and uncles that I used to rave with back in the day. So there were lots and lots of furious phone calls and messages to people, can you send me such and such? And people were really, really receptive. I mean, incredibly receptive. And I think, but if you look at the page, you'll see kind of patterns, and there's some similarities, because it was a handful of people that were submitting to us. And I was saying to the folk here earlier that one of the challenges that we've got is seeking permission. We don't put any pictures up without permission from the person that submitted them, but also as far as we can from the people that are in those pictures. Some of those people sadly have died, usually from some of the gay men from HIV-related illnesses. So that's been a challenge for some of us, but overall it has been submissions. And one of the challenges that we also have is getting a real cross-section of diversity from our community as well, hence the pictures from Miss Kimberly are absolutely stunning and wonderful. But we've got a lot of stuff sitting in the back burner, but if we get permission, then they'll go back up.
amazing.
Okay, I'll go. A mixture of submissions and research as well. So I think originally, when I started off my little, small series, I thought, okay, let me see like how much images is out there, for, like the black community in like Bristol and like Manchester and Leeds. And I can't lie, it took me a minute. But I think once I found one, I found more, and then I recognised certain like names, like photographers that came before me, like Bambi Burke. So I looked in there, and I think it just opened like a portal, but it was hard to kind of tap in. And as well as seeing like black photographers, documenting these different black communities, there were also like white photographers who've done it very well as well. Just like subcultures and like the youth culture, the drum and bass scene and St Paul's Carnival in Bristol, So a lot of research which kind of lives on the Instagram page just to show people like, there's images and information that does exist. Even like a lot of images, from like places in Cardiff as well. Like when we think about multiculturalism in the UK, Cardiff is missed out a lot, where in fact, I think it was classed as the very first multicultural place in the world.
Yeah.
But we don't know that
Really?
at all, So yeah, research, and then like my own submissions and like friends have submitted as well. People online, like it's reaching young people, it's reaching, older people as well. It's bringing people together. So I think naturally each of us like history. Especially if you're like speaking about like where we're coming from, So it encourages a lot of conversation, and people again like recognise themselves like on the page, or they'll be like reminiscent of like, oh okay, like I remember this group, or I remember this time. So yeah, some submissions as well. So yeah.
So I was like trying to like my throat. Can I have a question again, please?
Yeah, so just how do you source your material? So where do you sort of get it?
So obviously my own photography research, and also Shah, who's up there, does some of the drawing on my page. And say hi, Shah.
Hi.
So, yeah, amazing animator and illustrator who helps me out with like anything to do with drawing, because I can't draw. I can take photos, but drawing is not mine. But yeah, usually just from myself or just researching.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's just so nice to see this sort of like the depth and the sort of the varieties of where you're getting stuff from and sharing these stories. It's incredible.
And if I could just add, I think that we those of us that are kind of trying to pull together archive as well, it's kind of difficult sometimes. It's just because this is a pre-camera phone age, right? Where taking a picture is a real physical, you take your camera, you take a picture, you take it, you get it developed. And I know that there are people that have kept some of that stuff, but it felt much more disposable then, right? Yeah. So I've got like a trunk full of old pictures, and I know friends that have got photo albums, but I also know loads of people that were just, and also for Queer Lives, I spoke to a friend recently, and they were like, gosh, if only we'd archived at that time. And I was like, well, who's thinking of archiving? Yeah. Today it's like, let's snap, let's take a picture. Let's take 20 pictures of one thing. Whereas then it's like, well, actually, we're out in the moment. I'm not taking my camera to the club. So there's less material, and I love what you've got, because a lot of your stuff is familial, it's family, and that's kind of different. So I think if we were doing black gay family back in the day, it's slightly different. But I think that's a challenge for us as well.
Oh yeah, definitely. Thank you for sharing that and adding that on. So I feel like you've kind of touched on this, especially Karis and Mark, about like what your pages aim to address. But if you could speak to that a bit further, and also you, Staffy, about like what are some misconceptions you think people have about the Black British community, and how you're trying to combat that through the work that you do?
There's a few misconceptions. I think, I know the majority of the black community black population live in London, but I think there's often misconceptions that there aren't thriving communities outside of there as well, whether it's in a country space or a city space. There's a misconception there. And I also feel like the misconception of Black British culture as a whole is that it's already developed, where I think realistically, like, it's still developing. Yeah. We're still quite young. We have influences from like America, and like Jamaica and the Caribbean and West Africa, and and I think it's still happening. So when we're trying to tap into content and like films about Black Britain, there's usually like a very confined space where you watch a movie, it's about gang life. And it's only now we're seeing more movies, it's about like romance and just silly stuff, So I think it's still in development, so it's just understanding and trying to learn about one another, because in the next couple generations, like Black British culture will look completely different to how it is now. So yeah, I think it's just really good to document the now, and I think just diversify like our thoughts as well, yeah, when it's not all like one of the same, There's lots of similarities, but it's not just one way of what Black Britain is. Like, it's just so wide, and I think there's so much more that I need to learn and discover. So I'm only going to do that in continuing like doing my work, taking my images, going to different communities and exploring in that way. So
yeah, thank you for sharing. Blackness is definitely not a monolith, and I think that it's important for more people to actually like deep it, if that makes sense. And I get what you're saying about the films as well. Like, because even I think there's something coming out like around Boxing Day, which I'm really excited to watch.
I'm a bit romantic. I can't wait.
Literally, bring back romantic comedies.
I think that's the first Black British Christmas film as well.
It looks hella cheesy, but it looks great.
I'm enjoying it.
It's great.
Cheese is good.
Cheese is amazing.
Mark, do you want to answer that question next?
Yeah, I'll speak specifically. You've talked so eloquently about kind of wider communities and communities outside London. So I'll talk particularly about queer communities. Is that for many younger people, especially young people that I work with, and I try to do a lot of intergenerational work. Many people think that Black queer history started in this country in 2004 with UK Black Pride, which is an amazing event and a fantastic thing that happens, and I'm really glad it exists. But we're kind of lazy about looking back unless somebody goes, look. And also, because the mainstream media and the mainstream LGBT media, community and media is not digging into our past, I wanted to correct that narrative. I wanted younger people and people my age to go, actually, there was this huge, rich life. I mean, I came out in 1985 and I fell straight into the Black gay scene. And it was rich and it was vibrant. And you mentioned Small Acts, the Small Acts series and the movie Lovers Rock, which Steve McQueen made. I used to go to Black gay blues dances like that. And people don't know that they existed. There were Black Pride events happening at Black Pride. There was a massive HIV movement led by Black queer people in this country. And I wanted, unapologetically, to put that bang front and centre to redress that narrative. Because I've said when I was talking, we have been here and had a presence in our communities and in the wider mainstream communities since Windrush arrived. And you mentioned Cardiff before that. So, yeah, that's what I want the page to do. And I want people to look at it and go, yeah, we've been here for a long time. And I know as a Black gay man that looking back at my history gives me a strength to go forward. And that's what I want young people to do, is go, oh my gosh, that happened. That means I can do this now.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Can I have a question again, sorry? I'm just texting something I was going to forget.
Oh, no, that's totally okay. So the question is, what are some misconceptions you think that people have of the Black British community, and like how does your work address that, or like work to dispel those misconceptions?
I guess because I'm obsessed with like theatre at the moment, because I work in casting as well, so obviously like I just love going to theatre. How big of like a community in theatre there is, and like I feel like with theatre, it's seen as very wide, very expensive. I can't lie, it is. But there are so many different plays written and directed by Black people that people just don't know about, because they've just got a conception of the entire industry. And obviously, like so many other industries, are massive misconceptions. But I guess from my work, I feel like more recently I've been trying to show people there are so many different things to watch. And not just watching things off Netflix and BBC iPlayer, using other things like Mubi, even YouTube has good things. But I guess it's just showing trying to show people that there are black people in all these different creative spaces, I guess, and just kind of breaking down the barriers and just letting people know that these types of worlds exist and you're welcome here too.
Yeah.
So sort of coming on from what Mark said about how it impacts, so like your past is your future, it's a continuation. So sort of like going on from that, how do you see your work impacting society in the future? Yeah, so.
I'm hoping that, I mean, obviously there's a physical, kind of digital archive which is there. I'm hoping that it whets people's appetite to, one, dig into more of our history, but also to go out and create more pages, not just pages, but to create more stuff around archiving and looking into our history. I mean, I've just dropped, I dropped a podcast recently called We Were Always Here, which is around the UK HIV epidemic through Unheard Voices. Please check it out. It's on all podcast platforms. But doing both of those projects this year, for me, and I've never really dug into history, I want that impact to people, one, that people recognise that we've always been here, but also that you go out and you start asking questions, but also you create that stuff. And you go back to what you were saying about the theatre, that we need to create these spaces for ourselves. Nobody else is going to do it. And I want younger people particularly to go, actually, there's a career in archiving, right? There is work to be done. We should be in these institutions. And if setting up an Instagram page like the Bumpkin Files gets you into somewhere like this, then that's a bloody good thing. So that's what I want to see. That's what I want to see longer term, the impact of this being that we end up being part of these institutions. So our archive and our history becomes part of all of this.
Thank you.
Yeah, similar to what Mark was saying, just encouraging people to record history, you know, like, I think for things to be in history books in the future, you have to do the work now or do something presently. So I think being a photographer is this understanding, like, okay, cool, the camera is such a powerful tool, one of the most powerful tools in the world. You know, we see how influential and powerful the media is. And the way that we are depicted, black people as a whole, is, we're not going to get into that. So it was like, okay, cool, as a photographer, what do I want to say? How do I want to lead? So it's just hopefully encouraging people to look at Bumpkin Files, be like, actually, yeah, like I want to document this, I want to document that. There's so much like I won't be able to tap into because there's just a lot going on. But as long as we're collectively doing the work, because it's not going to take one person, it takes all of us, you know. So hopefully, it will have people in landscapes like mine, just being proud of where they're from and just just doing the effort to just, you know, let me document my community, let me speak to my grandparents or my parents or my guardians. So like oral history is important as well, you know. So yeah, that's what I really hope. And again, just widening the scope of Black British storytelling as well. And even it goes beyond the UK as well. Bumpkin Files, it explores unrepresented voices across the diaspora. So in like Europe, you know, Black Europeans or the Afro-European experience, going beyond that, and looking at context and parallels of communities across Europe as well. So I'm aware, I think there's quite a few Black Nigerian people in Poland. Things like that. Be cool to explore that eventually, you know, but I just wanted to start in the UK and see, you know, where it takes me. And as well, I've reached people across the pond, been on like an online panel with a French platform called Afro-P, and I've just met so many people along the way, and not just in the UK, like in America, Germany, there's many different places. So it's just amazing what this archiving can do. So I definitely encourage people to do so and just document your community.
Thank you.
I'm so sorry, but that Kim Possible beat through me.
Yeah. What's the stitch?
So can I have the question again, please?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, so sort of how do you see your work impacting society in the future?
I guess you guys have pretty much said it. I just have a quote to say: build your stage and make them watch. I feel like that's
That is
Alright.
so good.
I like that.
Yeah.
Beyonce, you know, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, Beyonce. I was wondering like a pen. You know them spin classes. I was in there. I was like Beyonce. I'm remembering that. Yeah.
Was that Beyonce's spin class?
No, not Beyonce's spin class. It was like a spin class at Cycles, and like they had
Oh,
like
okay,
a.
right, no, Beyonce. That's cool. I get it.
Yeah,
You're trying to sign up.
That's really awesome.
it was good. It was really good. Yeah.
So you said the quote is build your stage and let them watch.
Make them watch.
Make them watch.
Yeah, because like we can join these institutions and things like that, but for me personally, sometimes I just never feel fully accepted for who I am. So sometimes just making your own space, like with Black in Britain, essentially was just to make my own space to feel comfortable, create communities, and just be with my friends and whatever. Just be okay to be me, I guess.
Definitely. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's really important. What you said about building your own stage, because
You got Beyonce, man.
yeah. Thank you all for sharing that. And now this is a specific question to like each of you, more about what you are hoping, like any themes, events, or people you're hoping to document that you haven't had a chance to document. So I think you mentioned maybe expanding your page to covering Europe, or are there any would you say, obviously there are gaps because of like history and people pass away and people don't always document stuff, but are there things that you're like yearning to share that you hope to be able to in the future?
I mean, I don't think for us, I mean, ours is, Black and Gay back in the day has always been quite organic and really grassroots and community-led, which is who I am and also my ethos for all of my work. So as long as I can continue to get everyday people in there, and I think also, you know, in terms of Black British queer history, we don't have big names, we don't have big celebrities and all that, and I'm kind of cool with that, and I don't really want all of that, you know, because capitalism.
Yes.
But yeah, I think as long as we can continue to be organic in its nature and it has that rough around the edges feel, I'm good with it, you know. But I will say that I'm really glad that you mentioned a kind of the Afro-European context as well, because I would love to see, you know, Black and Gay back in the day France. I'm not really concerned about Black and the Gay US. Sorry, any American folk that are in the audience, but you know, Black, gay, queer history from the US takes up a lot of space, and we're constantly looking there. And our Black British history is often through the lens of that. And I do think there's time now for us to really, and I'm loving this generation who are coming through and going, no, Black British, it's Black British. That's it. That's what we're doing, because we've been there, right? So I'm really interested to see what happens with the connections across Europe now, and also the African continent and the Caribbean. That's where my interests lie.
Thank you.
No diss to any Americans, but Billy Porter.
I think for me, it ranges, you know. So I think one example, my mum's friend's mother used to be a nurse, basically in NHS, and she's from school. She used to like work in Hemel, where I'm from, and Hemel is like a part of a borough, like a British borough called Dacorum, and what they had before, don't know how many people are still like around now, but what they had before was a, I guess like a group for Black nurses, basically. So I think that's definitely something I would love to explore, but I think because of the pandemic, it's just been really difficult to be able to really plan that. And I think other things I want to explore and shed light on is like, you know, musicians in certain spaces. So there's quite a lot of talent, like coming from Hertfordshire, you know, from Connie Constance, Shea Universe, Colleen Taylor. There's a lot of talented people just doing their thing. So either do, you know, photo shoots or like moving image content, like documentaries, shedding light on that basically. Or just doing, you know, cool editorial shoots with, you know, Black British designers. You know, there's quite a few like Buckinghamshire. There's a lot of models at like Milton Keynes. Like, there's just so much going on. So I just want to be able to package it in a way that it will catch people's attention. That's through photography. That's just through editorial or documentary. Just do it in a very fun way, which it just intertwines with my photography work. But it's just a bonus that I'm incorporating Bumpkin Files. It just makes it so much easier and puts like less pressure on me. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Have the question again, please.
Yes. Definitely. Are there any like themes or people, specific people or events that you want to like cover on your page in the future? For example, you mentioned talking a bit about theatre now. Would you move a bit into like music or like the art world or like, yeah?
Well, before the lockdown, Black in Britain essentially was meant to be very, very small.
Okay.
So I remember just having that almost 300 like people following it on the page, and then the lockdown happened, BLM movement kind of blew up in the UK, and then boom, 10K. I was like, what the hell?
Yeah.
And then so it was really overwhelming trying to process all these like new people coming to my page, and just kind of deciding where do I want to take this now. So I guess it's more just because the page is so big, I'm more wanting to like amplify people who don't have the access to a larger audience.
Yeah.
And obviously working with people who are able to like, I guess financially back some projects for other people. For example, I was able to do an exhibition because my friend ran the Black Lives Matter in Colchester, and like she's a trustee for a gallery, and essentially got me to commission 2 Black fashion designers and got to exhibit. Yeah, I guess so, yeah, exhibit. Like, I can't remember how many people. It was like less than 20 photographers' work in a gallery in Colchester. So it was really nice traveling from London to Colchester, because if it weren't for this like exhibition that I was planning, I would never have gone to Colchester. Colchester's really nice as well. But yeah, I guess it's just really amplifying voices that were never seen on a bigger scale. Because when I had a small Instagram, because I do photography as well, I was like, all the people who have like less than 2K followers, their work bangs heavy, but because of clout and things like that, people are just like, okay, you've got massive following, you've got like a connection to this person, someone's going to book you, but people are never going to look at the people with like lower following sometimes. So yeah, just amplifying voices and history.
That's really great. Thank you for sharing.
All right.
So we've run out of time for a bit, so I'm going to ask you one last question, then we'll open up for a few questions from the floor, maybe like 1 or 2. To end this discussion, thank you so much for sharing. What does Black joy mean to you? Quick fire.
Do you want to go first? Yeah. I'm dyslexic. I'm going to go last. I'm very...
Go for it.
Oh gosh, I think Black joy, for me, I think it's just moments that I think collectively we recognise. So let's say you're out in public, something pops off, you'll look for the nearest Black person and just make up your face or just point, you know.
Yeah.
I think like moments, funny moments like that. I think Black joy is our belly laughs, you know. Black joy, I think it's just it exists in this space. I think there's so much really, but I think it's just moments that I think collectively and universally like we recognise. I feel like there's like a universal rhythm that's amongst us, you know. So yeah, I think
that's beautiful. Universal rhythm. Mark?
It's freedom. It's liberation. It's when we can be our own. I mean, the word unapologetic is used a lot, but it's when we can genuinely be our own unapologetic selves. And I just really quick anecdote. My dad was working class Jamaican man, worked on demolition site every single day of the week, and this is in the 70s, confronted with police brutality, racism on a daily basis, all that kind of stuff that we all know about. But on the Sunday morning, would get up and put on old school reggae music, cook breakfast, and dance with me and my sister in the house every single Sunday. That is for me the epitome of Black joy, because he was his free, total 100% self, and the only thing that mattered at that moment were his kids and planting on the frying pan. And that for me is the epitome of Black joy, is when we can be that freedom and we're authentic and we're ourselves and we don't give anything away.
That's really beautiful. I love that. It makes me think about like joy as resistance as well,
Yeah.
like talking about your dad coming home and on Sundays. Oh, that's great. Thank you.
John Holton planting.
I guess Black joy to me is enjoyment or henjoyment.
Henjoyment.
No, like You know what, I'm going to pick on myself for no one. And I think rest as well. Black joy is rest because it's not every day doing up stress and madness. Sometimes it's rest. But yeah, black joy to me is enjoyment and rest.
That's lovely. We cannot come and kill ourselves. I love that as well. Oh, thank you so much, all three of you, Mark, Karis, and Staffy, for joining us today. It's been so wonderful. Before we close, does anyone in the audience have any questions? We have Gaff and Amal with microphones who will come to you. And yeah, there's a question over there. Nate, in the black hoodie.
Hey guys, sorry I hate my voice on mics, but amazing conversation. Like you guys have such amazing minds, and I was just wondering, like, what would be the gas to your fires, like in terms of your practice. You spoke a bit about how like free experiences with the Black Ticket Project or editorial capabilities or like institutional gain would be things that would help to kind of cancel out, I guess, the erasure that we've experienced and that you guys have been responding to. So I was wondering, is there anything that's next or that could be added to what you're doing already to make sure that erasure is never a thing for future generations?
I think for Bumpkin Files, one of the things I want to do is creating pop-up events, so encourage people to put archived images in and exhibitions on projects I've created as a photographer, or just again archived images or of a certain theme. I think having spaces, physical spaces, is like really important, especially as the pandemic's hit. Everything just mash up, like like everything is online. A lot of connections been online, but I think to keep the connection strong is having physical spaces, and I think even prior to the pandemic, youth centres and community centres have been shut down, so it's even harder for us to really come together. There's not there's not like many community or cultural hubs, and I think it's caused a lot of disconnect. So I think for me, just having like exhibitions, whether big or small or pop-up events, just to bring people together, so people in like the photography industry or like people who know me for being a photographer comes together, but then there's other people who know me through Bumpkin Files, so they come together and everyone just mix up and create more links and bonds. So
That's awesome.
Amazing.
Thanks.
My gas, I love that, the way you phrase that. What's the gas to your fire? And my gas to my fire are you guys, people who are a lot younger than me, and I'm always inspired by this generation that's below me that are asking critical questions, that are going out into the world and going, actually, it's not going to be like that anymore. And I position myself as an older person now to give you the tools to do that. So when the BLM protests happened last year, I wasn't going to go out and then I was looking after myself and all the rest of it. But I had a lot of I call them my nephews, would ring me up and go, I'm going to my first protest. What do I need to do? So I'm going to equip you the tools to fight down Babylon, right? So you're safe and you're doing all the rest of it, but you're out there. So you lot are my fuel, and I'm going to keep doing that to make sure that you can tear down the institutions and bun them and all that kind of thing, but be safe and create content at the same time. Yeah. I had to say that in high school.
I guess my fire is the people around me, and just the amount of like Black creators and individuals there are who are just so talented and aren't given the space or like just amplified.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. I think we'll take one final question. Someone at the back has their hand. Sorry about that. We've just run out of time, but I'm sure afterwards some of the panelists may be available for you to chat to them one-on-one.
Hi. So my question is directed towards Mark, but I'm sure both you two can contribute. But you mentioned providing the generations under you with tools. And you also mentioned earlier about referencing. So how important is referencing when thinking of preserving culture and archiving?
And when you say referencing, what exactly do you mean?
So you spoke about getting the permission from people, and I'm assuming it's to credit them. So how important is that when you're thinking about archiving and thinking about telling people's stories for the future?
For me, it's absolutely essential. And I mean, one, there's the respect that one needs to show, the people that are in our pictures if we take our archive. But there's also referencing this because for way too long we are erased. And part of that erasure is not to reference. And so if we look across history where we have shown up, I mean, I was looking at some of the stuff in Bumpkin Files, and I was looking at some of that Windrush stuff that we've got, and I'm like, who are those people? What is their history? What is their narrative? So for me, having the captions, having the names, seeking the permission, it shows respect, but it also adds weight, and it actually places those names and those individuals into the story. So I'm sure many of you didn't know who Ted Brown was before you walked in this room, but loads of you know Peter Tatchell, because Peter has been great at going, here I am, put my name, make sure you reference me and all the rest of it. Ted's been quietly getting on with the work. So it's really, really important that those names and that referencing, wherever it is, it goes in there. And in my work, if I'm not able to do that, it's not getting included. So that's why it's absolutely essential. And thank you, that's a really great question. And it really reminds me of the importance of doing that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you all for attending as well. So this concludes our panel discussion and our events today. The British Museum Youth Collective created this day to kind of really highlight Black stories and narratives, because oftentimes they're really left out of mainstream media, or unfortunately in many institutions portrayed in a way that is degrading and not helpful or conducive to liberation for Black folk, or how in general society views us. So thank you so much for sharing all the work that you do, the really important work that you do. It's incredible. We're so happy you came here with us. And I've taken a lot today, and I'm sure people in the audience have as well. Okay, so yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.